The rain hammered the steel deck of the USS Chancellorsville like a million tiny drums. It was a cold, relentless downpour typical of a North Pacific autumn, and it matched the mood of the sailors huddled in the lee of the superstructure. They weren't huddled for warmth, but for a glimpse of history. On the weather deck, a small, wiry figure in a heavy coat stood apart from the clusters of officers and dignitaries, her dark hair plastered to her scalp, salt water dripping from her chin. She didn't seem to notice. Her name was Senior Chief Petty Officer Elias Thorne, and the sight of her standing there, a woman amidst a sea of men, was the very reason they were all getting wet. For 20 years, the United States Naval Special Warfare Development Group, known to the world as DevGru or SEAL Team 6, had been an exclusively male domain. The physical and mental crucible of BUD/S, the relentless pressure of the teams, was considered a barrier no woman could breach. Elias Thorne had just spent the last 3 years proving that conventional wisdom was a myth. She hadn't just passed the courses, she had rewritten the scoring standards. But the old guard, the men who had built the teams with their blood and sacrifice, were not convinced by a training file. They needed to see it with their own eyes. That was why Commander Rayburn "Razor" Jensen, a man whose face looked like it had been carved from Mount Rushmore by a clumsy child, was now addressing the assembled company. He was a legend, a man with more confirmed kills than most small armies, and his word was law. He had been publicly, vehemently opposed to integrating women into the teams. The Navy, in a move that was either brilliant or cruel, had given him operational command of a joint exercise and assigned Thorne to his unit. This briefing was his opening statement. He stood under a canvas awning, the rain drumming a steady rhythm behind him. He didn't need a microphone. His voice, hardened by decades of barking orders over gunfire, carried easily. "Listen up," he began, his eyes sweeping the crowd. They were hard eyes, the color of a winter sky, and they missed nothing. "This is a straightforward communication drill, a simulated hostage rescue in a dense urban environment. We're testing new quantum entanglement comms. But the core of the exercise is old school: signal discipline, unit cohesion, and split-second decision-making." He paused, letting the gravity of the moment settle. Then, his gaze landed on Thorne. He didn't point, but everyone felt it. "For this drill, we're operating in 2 squads. Gold Squad, led by me, will be the primary assault element. Black Squad will be support and communication relay." He let the next words hang in the air. "And just so we're all clear, I want to establish a ground rule regarding primary signals. The Go code, the one that confirms a clear shot on the primary target, the hostage taker, will be handled solely by the assault element commanders. That signal belongs to the SEALs on the ground." He didn't say her name. He didn't have to. The implication was as clear as the rain soaking his audience. She was in Black Squad, the support unit. She was a relay, not a shooter. She was a SEAL in name, but not in his reality. He was drawing a line in the water. A few of the younger operators shifted uncomfortably. Thorne herself remained utterly still, her face a mask of professional neutrality. Only her eyes moved, meeting Jensen's gaze without flinching. She gave a single, slow nod. Acknowledgement, not acceptance. The exercise took place in the mock town of Terroristville, at a special operations training facility in the California desert. The rain of the coast had been replaced by a dry, biting wind that whipped dust into swirling devils. The city was a collection of shipping containers, prefab concrete buildings, and rusted-out cars, designed to mimic a Middle Eastern village. Inside one of the buildings, role players acting as hostages and hostage-takers waited. The primary target was a high-value individual, a terrorist leader with a dead man's switch tied to a simulated chemical weapon. Gold Squad, led by Jensen, moved into their assault positions with the fluid, silent grace of apex predators. They were ghosts in the gray pre-dawn light. Thorn and Black Squad were positioned on a rooftop overlooking the eastern approach. Their job to monitor communications, provide overwatch, and, if necessary, act as a quick reaction force. Thorn crouched behind a low parapet, her eyes glued to her rifle's scope, scanning the windows of the target building. The new comms unit, a small device tucked behind her ear, hummed with low-level static. Inside the building, things went sideways almost instantly. The exercise controllers, always eager to test the limits of the operators, threw in a curveball. The hostage takers, alerted by an unseen observer, moved the hostages. The primary target, the man with the dead man's switch, was now in a different room. A room with a window that had a perfect, unobstructed view of Jensen's squad leader, who was preparing to breach the main entrance. It was a kill shot, and the role player was instructed to take it. Jensen's squad froze. They couldn't move without exposing their leader. The clock was ticking. Over the comms, the tension was a physical thing. Gold 1, this is Gold 6. Target is moved. He's in the northeast window. He has a shot on your position. Jensen's voice came back, a low growl. Copy. We are blind. Can anyone acquire? Thorn could. From her rooftop, the northeast window was perfectly visible. Through her scope, she could see the role player, a man in a dark turban, grinning as he held a prop pistol aimed at the corner where Jensen was pinned. Her crosshairs settled on the man's center mass. A squeeze of the trigger, in a real-world scenario, and the threat would be neutralized. She had the shot, but she didn't have the authority. That signal, the go code, belonged solely to the SEALs on the ground, according to Jensen. She keyed her mic. Black lead to Gold 1. I have target acquired. Northeast window. Clear shot. Awaiting instruction. For an agonizing 3 seconds, there was silence. It was an eternity in a firefight. Jensen was calculating. To give the order would be to admit that the support element, that she, had the tactical advantage. It would be to eat his words. But to hesitate was to fail the exercise, and failure was something Rayburn Jensen's body and soul were not wired to accept. Gold 1 to Black lead, he said, his voice tight. Hold! We are maneuvering! It was the wrong call. Thorn knew it instantly. They didn't have time to maneuver. In the 2 seconds it would take them to shift positions, the role player would have fired. The exercise would be a failure. But she held. She was a professional. She followed orders. Then a new voice cut through the comms, shaky and urgent. It was the young SEAL serving as the communicator with the hostages via a hidden camera feed. Gold 1, Hostage 3 is having a medical episode. They're saying it's a heart attack. The hostage takers are getting spooked. The variables had just multiplied. A hostage was down. The captors were becoming unpredictable. One of them might panic and trigger the simulated chemical weapon. The situation was degrading into chaos. Jensen's plan was in shambles. In that moment of confusion, Thorn saw her opening. It wasn't about disobeying a direct order. It was about interpreting the spirit of the mission over the letter of a petty slight. The mission was to save the hostages. The primary obstacle was the man in the window. He was the nexus of the entire threat. She had the shot. She had the means. And now, with the chaos unfolding, she had the justification. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't announce her intention. She simply acted. Her finger, which had been resting gently on the trigger guard, moved to the trigger. She took a breath, let half of it out, and held it. The world contracted to the circle of her scope, to the figure of the man in the window. In a real scenario, this would be the moment of ultimate consequence. In the exercise, it was a test of judgment. She squeezed. A puff of compressed air from her simulated integrated training weapon system marked a perfect hit on the role player's chest. A light on his vest flashed red, indicating a kill. The man stumbled back, dropping his prop pistol. The immediate threat to Jensen was gone. Over the comms, for a single heart-stopping second, there was absolute silence. Then, chaos. "What the hell was that?" a voice yelled. "Who fired?" shouted another. "I have a kill signal on the primary target. The exercise controller's voice cut through, calm and official. "Threat neutralized." Then Jensen's voice. It wasn't a yell. It was worse. It was quiet, controlled, and filled with a cold, dangerous ice. "Black lead, identify your shooter." Thorne keyed her mic. Her voice was steady, betraying none of the adrenaline flooding her system. "This is Black 2. I had the shot. Target was about to fire on Gold 1. Hostage situation was deteriorating. I took the shot." She had just directly countermanded a standing order from a living legend. In the teams, that was career suicide. It was worse than that. It was an act of profound disrespect. She could feel the stares of her own squad mates boring into her back. They were frozen, waiting for the thunderbolt. The next few minutes were a blur of activity. The exercise was paused. Jensen's squad cleared the building without further incident, finding the hostages safe, though one role player was now dead from the heart attack. The controllers logged the results. A successful mission. All objectives met. Hostages safe. Primary target eliminated. But no one was looking at the scoreboard. All eyes were on the rooftop where Thorne knelt, and the area below where Commander Jensen now stood, hands on his hips, staring up at her. He didn't motion for her to come down. He waited. She gathered her gear, slung her rifle, and made her way down the ladder from the rooftop, her boots hitting the dusty ground with soft thuds. She walked towards him, stopping a respectful 3 paces away. She didn't salute. In the field, in the middle of an exercise, that wasn't protocol. She just stood there, at attention, and met his gaze. The men from both squads formed a loose, silent circle around them. The wind picked up, swirling dust around their boots. Jensen just looked at her. He looked at the set of her jaw, the calmness in her eyes, the way she held herself, not defiant, but utterly, unshakably certain. He saw no fear, no arrogance, just the quiet, focused competence of a professional who had made a call. He took a step closer. The air crackled. He was going to rip into her. He was going to dress her down in front of everyone and make an example that would be whispered about for decades. Everyone braced for it. Then, he did something no one expected. He reached up to his ear and pulled out his own communication earpiece. He held it in his palm for a second, looking at it, then at her. He extended his hand, offering it to her. It was a gesture laden with symbolism. He was offering her his comms, his connection to the team. He was offering her his place in the net. "Your call was tactically sound," he said, his voice low enough that only she and the nearest men could hear. "My order was emotionally driven. I put my pride ahead of the mission. You put the mission first." He paused, the muscles in his jaw working. "I was wrong." He didn't wait for a response. He simply turned and walked away, dismissing the squads with a wave of his hand. He left her standing there, holding the silence, his warm earpiece resting in her palm. She had returned the signal he had claimed as his own, not with a word of defiance, but with an act of decisive leadership. And in doing so, she had earned the only thing that truly mattered in his world, his respect. The rain had stopped, and a weak sun was beginning to break through the clouds over the desert.